Hey everyone, it's Brian, and today's lesson wraps up our time in Latin America. We'll be moving on from here to another great part of the world. More on that soon. But before we do, let's review everything we've learned about our neighbors to the south. So first of all, let's see if you recall the nations found in Latin America and where they're located. To review, let's try something a little different. Besides Mexico, there are 7 nations in Central America that are part of Latin America. Start at Mexico and move south. Take a couple of seconds and try to name them. Okay, here's a list. Does that help? Moving southward from Mexico, those nations include Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. So, how'd you do? South America includes 12 independent nations plus a territory. Here's a blank map of the continent for you to examine. Can you identify several of them? Okay, how about if we provide you with another list? Starting in the northeast, you can see Colombia in purple. Moving eastward, you see Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana in the northern tropics region. Move back to Colombia, and below there, in gold, you can see Ecuador. Moving southward is Peru, Bolivia, and Chile, the rest of the Andean region's nations. Of course, Brazil is huge, and you can see it in green. In the southeast, the grasslands countries of Paraguay, Argentina, and Uruguay complete the continent. Last, we have the Caribbean. Here, let's focus only on the 13 independent nations. Now, this is pretty difficult. Okay, let's add a list to help you out a little bit. Okay, this one is pretty hard, but let's break it down by starting in the Greater Antilles. You see the largest country, Cuba, very clearly in light orange. North of it in navy is the Bahamas, while south of Cuba in blue is Jamaica. East of Cuba is the island of Hispaniola with Haiti in fuchsia and the Dominican Republic in purple. By the way, that's Puerto Rico in dark orange just east of there. The other nations are located in the Lesser Antilles, the small islands to the southeast, and mixed with several islands which are territories of other nations. From north to south, you have the independent countries including Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua, Dominican, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, Grenada, and Trinidad and Tobago. You probably recall that Latin America is famous for its beaches and tropical weather, but offers more diversity in physical characteristics and climate than many might expect. We discussed the Caribbean, which has 700 islands and keys. Of course, the stunning white sands and enchanting blue waters truly belong in a tropical climate setting. On the opposite end of the climate spectrum is the Andes, the world's longest mountain range. It includes numerous cordilleras extending northward into Central America and southward to the tip of the continent. Of course, there you'll find Patagonia, a land of mountains, deserts, glaciers, and varied climates. And further south from there is literally the end of the world, Tierra del Fuego. Between the Andes and the Pacific Ocean is the Atacama Desert, a narrow 1,000-mile-long strip of land that has been used for Mars simulations and is the driest non-polar desert on Earth. The Ring of Fire also snakes its way along the Andes and into Central America, creating volcanoes and earthquakes all along the coast. In southeast South America, the Pampas Plains take up almost 500,000 square miles of the continent and offer lush grasslands that stimulate economic prosperity based on agriculture. The northern part of the continent is famously home to the Amazon Basin, the largest rainforest in the world at more than 2 million square miles. In addition to being the most biodiverse place on the planet, the rainforest is often called the lungs of the world because of the amount of oxygen it generates, creating concerns for its ongoing deforestation. The economic development of Latin American nations ranges drastically. The Bahamas, for example, have a GDP per capita of more than 33,000 US dollars, while Haiti's is less than 3,000 US dollars despite their close proximity in the Caribbean. Likewise, nations such as Brazil and Uruguay in South America are relatively prosperous, while Venezuela, in spite of owning the world's largest oil reserves, is the poorest country on the continent. Of course, tourism spurs the economy in the Caribbean and parts of Mexico, while South and Central America are more reliant on industry such as mining, petroleum, and agriculture. Part of the explanation for economic instability in many nations is the political and governmental volatility found throughout Latin American history. Despite republic forms of government and democracy for its people, many Latin American countries suffer because changes seem to result in the same small groups of the wealthy maintaining the bulk of political and economic control. Now, make no mistake, most Latin American nations have seen at least one revolution for independence and new political leadership. Those range from the slave uprising in Haiti to Simón Bolívar's push for change across South America to the creation of the Mexican Constitution of 1917. It's just that the results have been mixed. And just as most nations across Latin America have seen similar upheavals in government, the majority also speak the same language. Most of Central and South America, along with Cuba and the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean, speak Spanish. However, Brazil, by far the largest nation of South America, speaks Portuguese. And 10 of the 13 independent nations of the Caribbean, along with Belize and Guyana, use English. Suriname speaks Dutch, and Haiti speaks Creole. Latin America is even more unified spiritually. A predominant number of nations have a majority of Christian believers, with most of those being Roman Catholic. That religious affiliation, like the languages spoken, is largely a result of the ethnic groups prevalent across Latin America. While some nations, such as Haiti and several other Caribbean countries, have a significant African cultural influence, the populations of most Latin American nations are mostly mestizo. In fact, across almost all of Central and South America, the majority of each nation's peoples classify themselves as white or mestizo, meaning they have an ancestry mixed between Europeans and indigenous ancestors. As we wrap up our fact-finding mission in Latin America and our research on its nations and peoples, we encourage you to review previous lessons to help you prepare for the final assessment activities. It's a lot of information, and looking and listening again might be really helpful. That's all for now. We hope you've enjoyed your time in Latin America and look forward to traveling with us again. Until next time, keep exploring.
Hey, hey.